references in the New Testament from St. Paul, the apostasy that has to come and so on, before the man of sin. The gospel has to be preached throughout the world. Then the book of Apocalypse, I just want to read, somebody will read this for me please. The stage that we're at in the book of Apocalypse, we're looking at chapter 9. Chapter 9 is where I believe we're at, according to the exegesis of Venerable Father Reverend Bernard Kramer wrote this book. This book is only about the Apocalypse, verse by verse, he explains it. And in his opinion, we're at chapter 9 and verse 20. So that's for all our self-importance, we're just one verse of the Apocalypse. But there's a lot of things in chapter 9 that are happening. But this is after the first woe. First woe had passed, two woes still to come. We're in just before the two woes to come, the period up to the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. That's chapter 9 of the Apocalypse. And read it, if somebody would read it. Anybody? Mary. Read there to the end. You can sit here. Sit down there for a second. To the end. Just want to record it.
The first woe hath passed. Behold, hereafter two woes are still to come. And the sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a single voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God. And it said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Loose the four angels who were bound on the great river Euphrates. Then were loosed the four angels who had been held ready for the hour and day and month and year, in order that you should kill the third part of men. And the number of the troops of the cavalry was 20,000 times 10,000. I heard the number thereof. And this is the manner after which the horses and they that sat upon them appeared in my vision. They wore breastplates, the colour of fire, and of hyacinth, and of sulphur. And the heads of the horses were as heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and sulphur. By these three plagues were killed the third part of men, by the fire, by the smoke, and by sulphur, issuing from their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouth and on their tails. For their tails are like serpents, with heads, and by means of them they do harm. And the other men, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands, and ceased adoring the devils and idols of gold and silver and bronze, and stone and wood, which can neither see, nor hear, nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders, nor of their enchantments, nor of their impurity, nor of their thefts.
Thank you. Thanks be to God. That's the Apocalypse. So that's verse chapter 9, 4 to 21. That's just to put us into the picture. If you want to read the book of Apocalypse, that's where we will be going through in the next short while. There's a great council that's prophesied. The council comes after that, which will be in chapter 10. The Apocalypse is divided in two halves. And when you read in the Apocalypse about a star falling from heaven, that means a priest or a prelate or a cardinal. A star is somebody in heaven, meaning in the church. So a star falling from heaven, like Luther is described earlier on, and the Greek schism and so on. If you want to go into extreme detail, that's the book to get, the Book of Destiny. And it will explain exactly where we are and where we're going. But just to look at where we are now and where we can expect to be heading shortly. There's a lot of prophecies. That's just looking at a little bit of what's in the Bible, what's in the New Testament. There's also the Old Testament, is the book of Daniel. And in 1 hour, you couldn't do justice to all of that, so I'm not going to even try. But what I'd like to do is to concentrate on saints who have been prophesying and who've been canonized by the Church. And maybe a good idea would be to look at our own Irish saints, because we had saints who gave prophecy. And here's one. There was a saint, St. Columkill. He lived in Glen Columkill, which is on the map there just in front of me. This is Donegal, as you can see down there. Now, Donegal, the prophecies of St. Columcille would have been verbal. They would have been oral prophecies, mainly. Well, even before St. Columcille, let's look at St. Barkin, Irish, died 544. He said, after a man whose name will be Rua, which means red in Irish, a spirit of fire will come from the north. He will march towards Dublin. There will be one Lord over Ireland. It is he that will bring affliction to the foreigners, by which their savage hordes shall suffer. Until he will sail across the azure sea to Rome, he will be a great king, renowned for feats of arms. So we're talking about a king coming shortly in Ireland. There will be a king in Ireland, a Catholic king, who will come from the Glen. Now, that's a prophecy from Columcille. The Glen is Glen Columcille. That's what the word means. Glen Columcille is where St. Columcille was born. And the Rua from the Glen is this person who will be the king over Ireland. So, up Donegal. Now, another Irish saint, Saint Senanus, and S-E-N-A-N-U-S, or Senan. Yeah. Okay, just give it to you. This is a very detailed description of where we're heading towards. He says, he's asked the question, what will be the condition of the race of people in that time? They will not observe rectitude in their judgments. They will entertain false and treacherous intentions. Falsehood will characterize that class of men who will sit in judgment to pass sentence according to the law. Between the father and his own son, litigations will subsist. The clergy of the Holy Church will be addicted to pride and injustice. The advantages they will aim at will be the possession of worldly substance. Women will abandon feelings of delicacy and cohabit with men out of wedlock. They will follow those practices without secrecy, and such habits will become almost unsuppressible. All will rush into iniquity against the will of the Son of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The earth will not produce its fruits for the race of people to whom I allude. Full mansions will be deserted, and unpleasant will be the tidings concerning them. Dreadful plagues will come upon all the race of Adam. And then he's talking about the English. And this is in relation to the Irish king and the great monarch, the French king. So it's giving us the time frame. They, the foreigners, will themselves betray each other, in consequence of which their sovereignty will be broken. They will stain their swords and battle axes with blood. They will be a selfish race devoid of benignity. The son of the king of Saxon will come to join them across the sea. This is the great monarch. He will part with the sovereignty of the English in the country whence he will come. The English and the Irish of Ireland will unite in one confederation against the forces of the Saxons. The king of Saxon's son will come at the head of his forces, and that's the great monarch. In consequence of the protection he will extend to them, Ireland will be freed. One monarch will rule in Ireland over the English and the pure Irish. From the reign of that man, the people will suffer no destitution. I think you can take from that there's going to be probably a bit of a fight on hands. A bit of a fight on hands. Anyway, St. Columcille. St. Columcille again is described in great detail that there will be a lot of violence, that it'll be a very unsafe time. And he's describing anarchy, and he's saying why it will happen. This is what's coming now here in Ireland. Great carnage will be made. Justice shall be outraged. Many evils, great suffering shall prevail, and many unjust laws will be administered. The time will come when they will not perform charitable acts, and truth will not remain in them. They will plunder the property of the church. They will be continually sneering at each other. They will employ themselves at reading and writing. They will scoff at acts of humanity and at irreproachable humility. There will come times of dark affliction, of scarcity, of sorrow, and of wailing in the latter ages of the world's existence, and monarchs will be addicted to falsehood. He's describing the whole situation, and he says that the state will take over the property of the church. And again, I'm just going to read some excerpts. These books, if you want to get them, they're available there. But he continues, he says, the clergy shall be led into error by the misinterpretation of their reading. The relics of the saints will be considered powerless. Every race of mankind will become wicked, and so on. And concluding this, he said that church livings will become lay property. The trees will not bear their usual quantity of fruit. Fisheries will become unproductive. Inclement weather and famine shall come, and fishes shall forsake the rivers. The people oppressed for want of food shall pine to death. Dreadful storms and hurricanes shall afflict them. Numberless diseases will then prevail. Fortifications shall be built narrow during those times of dreadful danger. And then he's giving a prophecy about a judgment which seems to indicate instant death. And this is what it says. A great event will happen. I fail not to notice it. Rectitude will be its specious motive. And if you be not truly holy, a more sorrowful event could not possibly happen. And that means to die in mortal sin is the most sorrowful thing that could happen in your life, because you don't get it. So he's saying this will be an attack. It's using a spurious motive for the attack, and this will, in the context in which this was given in other contexts, he seems to be talking about the destruction of Dublin, that Dublin would be destroyed by fire. So then he's continuing. I'm not going to read continually all the prophecies because there's just too much detail in them, but what he's saying is a fleet will come to Ireland, a foreign fleet. And when you put that together with other prophecies, it would seem to indicate it's a fleet that's initially it would be controlled by communist power, whether it's Russia or China, and that it would circle Ireland, and there would be a lot of death and destruction. They will inflict a flesh-hewing course of warfare to such a degree that scarce a man of them shall escape. And he calls it the fleet of rowing wheels. He's talking about propellers, which they didn't have at that time. And he describes where they're coming from. They come from a land which is facing the west. So it could be from Russia, from the description that he's given. He says that the enemies of the English will be aroused into activity, those who reside in the eastern and western parts of the world, and they will engage in battle on the circumscribed sea. Now, that means a sea that's surrounded by land, probably the Mediterranean, or it could be the Straits of Hormuz at Iran, or it could be the Irish Sea. But fitting it with other prophecies, it would seem to indicate the Mediterranean. And then he's describing that the great monarch will come, and then the victory will be for the great monarch. That's just a short excerpt from St. Columcille. What warnings, 3 warnings will come, according to St. Columcille, before these things happen. 2 have already occurred. 3 warnings will be given before their final fall. And the first one is the burning of the Tower, London Tower. The burning of the dockyard of the English has already happened. And the last one, the burning of the treasury where gold is deposited, the mint. That has never happened, to my knowledge, as far as I know. That's St. Columcille. Another Irish saint is St. Ultan. And he's talking about this king from Donegal, the king from Glencolumcille. He says, then the Rua, the red, will proceed to the south. He will offer much opposition to the English. Now, when they're using the word English here, they're using the word for a foreigner. It could be another invader. It could be English, it could be Russian, so just to keep that in mind. Anyway, he says, my confidence is in the redhead for valour. He will free Ireland from her difficulties. In a month after that hard-fought battle, another king will come from the north. And he's talking about the fight will continue, but the victory will be for the Rua, and of the enemy none will remain but what birds will be able to carry off in their claws. So there's a description there of what is coming in terms of Ireland. And most of the prophecy that you come across doesn't really deal with Ireland. So I just thought we'd include that just to get a bit of a picture. A lot of what St. Columkill was talking about was universal disarray and want and famine. So that's bringing us up to St. Maltavlicht. St. Maltavlicht? Anybody ever heard of him? Maltavlicht. Maltamhlacht. Don't think that's Malachi. The 7th century.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't get it.
Maltamhlacht. Maltavlicht. 7th century. In the latter ages, destitution will fall upon many people, and whenever the English will commit great evils against Ireland, then the English will be expelled, and Ireland will become the property of her rightful owners. So what we're talking about is not just going to be happening in Ireland, it'll be happening on a worldwide scale. And there's dates that are given as to when this might occur. And what I would suggest from my reading of it is that we're talking about 5 years. So it would be a good idea to have a 5-year plan. It might be 4 years, it might be 5. Most of the prophecies say that the great monarch will be in war, in battle, until he's 40 years of age, and for 4 years. He'll be fighting for 4 years. There's the French monarch. There's a date that's given by Saint Bridget, and it's given by some other saints. And I'll just give you, it's the date in which the Pope will flee from Rome. The date in which the Pope will flee from Rome. And the Pope that we are talking about is the present Pope, according to most of the prophecies, as far as I can see. And the description of the day in which that occurs, the year is given. The Pope will cross the sea in a year when the feast of St. George, April 23rd, falls on Good Friday, and St. Mark's feast, April 25th, falls on Easter Sunday, and the feast of St. Anthony, June the 13th, falls on Pentecost, and the feast of St. John the Baptist, June the 24th, falls on Corpus Christi. This book was written, actually, The Prophets in Our Times, by a priest, an English priest, Reverend Gerald Culleton, during the Second World War, when people were thinking maybe Hitler is the Antichrist, and they were looking for direction from prophecy. And these prophecies apply still. They didn't come to pass in the Second World War. But that date, he says in the book, he says all these occurrences will take place in the year 1943, and not again until 2038. Now, the present Pope, what age will he be in 2038? I think 111. He'd be 111. So this is not the only prophet who said this. St. Bridget of Sweden said the same thing. And she's talking about a German figure who attacks the church, coming from Prussia. Prussia means East Germany, Berlin, the part which would have been under communist rule. St. Bridget of Sweden said this Antichrist, when I say Antichrist, I'm talking about minor Antichrist, and not the real final Antichrist at the end of the world. But St. Bridget says, he will be most invincible in war and will subdue all Germany. The great house will almost be pulled down. At last the eagle from the north, that's the great monarch, will come from the north to the west, and will, together with her children, be surrounded by the towers of Spain. So Spain will support them, and will raise up Germany again. The eagle will also invade the Mohammedan countries, and will carry the admirable sign, the cross, in the land of promise, Palestine. And then peace and abundance will return to the world. The most unhappy war will end when an emperor of Spanish origin will be elected, who will, in a wonderful manner, be victorious through the sign of the cross. He will destroy the Jewish and Mohammedan sects. He will restore the church of Santa Sophia in Constantinople, and all the earth will enjoy peace and prosperity, and new cities will be built. Let the Greeks know that their empire, kingdom, or dominions will never be secure in settled peace, but always held in subjection by their enemies, from whom they will have to suffer grievous hardships and constant distress, until with true humility and goodwill they will have devoutly submitted to the Church of Rome and to her faith, conforming themselves entirely to the holy ordinance and rites of the Church. And she again repeats these dates. When the feast of St. Mark, April 25th, falls on Easter, the feast of St. Anthony, June the 13th, on Pentecost, and that of St. John, June the 24th, on Corpus Christi, the whole world will cry, woe. Now, again, in brackets, he says, these feasts occurred in 1943, but not again until 2038. So, are we going to be waiting until 2038 for the Pope to flee from Rome? No, we're not. Is there any time when this could possibly ever occur before 2038? Yes. The only time it can possibly occur, as far as I can see, is 2015. 2015, another prophecy says there will be no Pope in Rome for 2 years or more. If the Pope leaves in 2015, then the triumph could be expected in 2017, which is the 100th anniversary of Fatima. So let's just say this is possibly correct. And there's a lot of reasons.
Sorry, Eamon, when you say 2015, why do you think that?
Yeah, well, if anyone has a church calendar, or you can look it up yourself in your mobile phone. If you go to the date, the 25th of April or the 13th of June, it's only 2015 that all those dates fall together on Fridays, Sundays, and Corpus Christi, Thursday. So, if that's the case, 2015, if that's when the Pope flees Rome, the warning will come after that. So the warning cannot come until the Pope flees from Rome. You know that. Sometimes you hear people saying the warning's coming in September, it's coming next month, it'll come next March. Can't happen. Cannot happen. They're not inspired. They're using human reason or whatever. The Pope has to flee from Rome before the warning comes. People, you know that, do you? No. The Pope, the illumination of conscience, the warning. And that won't happen until the Pope flees from Rome. The warning will come when things are at their worst. According to Garabandal, which I fully believe in, and Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Saint Mother Teresa, believed in it as well. Saint, right? Saint Mother Teresa. So she had no doubt whatsoever about Garabandal. And Mary Lowley, who died last year, I think, she said that the warning would come after the Pope returned from Russia. So the Pope would go to Russia, and when he returned, then the revolution would break out. Communism would be everywhere. Communism will be in every country in the world. Revolution will start almost simultaneously. And that's not something that just happens at the drop of a hat. You have societies, secret societies, that are organized to bring that about. It can't just happen just willy-nilly that every country in the world has revolution at the same time, or that there's so many countries in the world with this phony demand for abortion and so on. It's been orchestrated, and Pope John Paul II said that when he produced Evangelium Vitae in defense of life, that it was a coordinated activity against life. There was no popular demand coming from the people. And the same way, this revolution, they will spring up because they'll be orchestrated. And it's not to say that people are free or Masons is not the truth. And that's normal. The language of Satan is the opposite to what they say. So they're not free, they're slaves. They're not Masons, they're destroyers. So this activity of revolution fits in with them perfectly. They're slave destroyers. And to say that they're slaves means that they don't have freedom. They have to follow and obey their master. And their master, whom they worship, is Lucifer. And they don't make any secret about that. And Lucifer is not a kind master to have. So they're in bondage. They're not free. So this revolution will come after the Pope returns from Russia. I don't know when the Pope is going to Russia, but It's not on the agenda as far as I can see in the near future. If there was a sudden crisis, he could go very rapidly. But Mary Lowley said very specifically that when the Pope returns from Russia, communism will follow on its heels. And she said the miracle would be paid for with much blood. And we're talking about the greatest persecution of the church in its history. If you thought Cromwell was bad, watch out. And people will say, it couldn't happen here. Well, Cromwell happened here. And it'll happen in places where people will say, this couldn't have happened in this place. It'll be so thorough a persecution of the church and destruction of the hierarchy. And any who are faithful to the true Pope, which is Pope Benedict. In other words, there'll be a false Pope, at least one. And a lot of people who want to will follow the false Pope. But many people may be deceived by the media. I just got a text there. They're talking on News Talk today about the Irish Church breaking away from Rome. Yeah. You know, this is not. When you move forward into the prophecies, you're living in it. You're living what you're reading on the page. It's kind of unreal. And this is only the start of it. They're talking about the Irish Church breaking away from Peter, which is crazy. But they don't think that's crazy. And we have the, you know what's happening, the effrontery of our so-called democratic leaders lying about the Pope, lying about the Vatican, and not even having the humility to admit that they're lying, and still having the effrontery to say that this is the truth. And what court of law is going to vindicate the Vatican or the Pope? But anyway, this is what we are now this year. Give it another couple of years. But even before the Pope flees from Rome, there will be war and anarchy throughout the world, throughout Europe in particular. The great monarch, if he begins 4 years before 2017, we're talking about 2013, where the revolution and the war would be in full sway. And we're now at 2011, we're going into 2012. Before the war that comes, you'll have a massive economic crash that, again, the likes of which has never occurred in history. And 1930s had nothing on it. And again, this is given very clearly. There's many